Alright, so I've missed out on a lot of Warhammer 3 news in my absence, which means that any idea of there being reaction content off of it, it's not happening, which is unfortunate because a lot of people do enjoy that kind of stuff. It's not necessarily what I set out to do with this channel, and I don't want to do it too much. I especially don't want to be one of those YouTubers who entirely makes a channel going, "Oh, I didn't expect that. Oh, what a shock." So I try to spend less time reacting and more time talking. But for today, there's going to be no reactions because I've been here for the entirety of the news cycle. I did not keep myself blind to all this. So this is just going to be nothing but analysis. For a lot of people, that's not going to be what they want, and I understand that. In fact, this might not be for anyone, but it may be for someone, and I feel like having been absent for so long, I feel like I should make this just in case there is anyone who cares about what I've got to say about all the stuff that has transpired since that first Cathay trailer that I managed to watch and pretty well put up nothing since. So this is just going to be a probably pretty long-winded video that I may have to cut at a couple parts. Inconceivable me editing, I know. Of me just going over and discussing the various reveals that have happened for Warhammer 3 since the initial Cathay trailer. I will go ahead and skip all these lore blogs right now because the video is going to be long enough, and I'll probably be talking about the Cathay lore as we go through the stuff. What I will say is the broad strokes of Cathay lore, I'm very happy with it. I'm glad that they didn't just make Cathay dragons everywhere, everything dragons, because they kind of did that for Kislev with bears. I don't mind too much of it with Kislev. I quite like Kislev as it's being implemented in Warhammer 3. I might love it once I get my hands on it. But the bear thing is a bit silly. They kind of had to do the Kislev bear thing, because on the tabletop, Kislev's thing was pretty well just mundane humans, and Boris rode a bear. And that worked fine for the tabletop, because Kislev was mostly just a supplement you'd use for, like, the Empire or something. But for making them an entire new race that you play separately from everybody else, that doesn't work anymore. They need a little more flash and sizzle, you know? Because, I mean, people love the Empire, perceiving it as more of a mundane, you know, realistic race, but even that's a lie, because there's steam tanks and demogryphs and griffins and pegasus and all other things, not to mention loads of magic. Let me just go ahead and start off with the Cathay roster. Oh, I already had it open in another tab. Silly me. Anyways, the Cathay roster. I'll just go over it real quickly, because I'm real happy with it. Miao Ying and Zhao Ming both seem very cool. One of the two is very obviously more appealing than the other. I think Crave Assembly probably knew this going in. Games Workshop, I don't know if they knew that, because these guys were probably both Games Workshop's work. And Games Workshop may have went in more so with the idea that people would love Miao Ying because so many people love Karl Franz, right? So Miao Ying is like Karl Franz, which is to say vanilla, kind of boring. Zhao Ming is much more entertaining. And, you know, over time we're starting to see, I think Balthazar Gelt is starting to become more popular than Karl Franz for a lot of Empire players because Gelt has so much more personality than Franz. And with Cathay, right out of the gate, Zhao Ming has already seen a lot more approval than Miao Ying. But I like both of them. You know, Miao Ying, like, I won't say that every lord for a given faction needs to be boring for everyone to be interesting. But Miao Ying does kind of set the standard for the Dragon Children, or the Children of the Dragon Emperor, whatever you want to call them. And that does make Zhao Ming a bit more unique. It makes him stand out as kind of an oddball amongst his siblings. So I do like that. Miao Ying is there if you want to play just like the tough, hard-nosed, hold the fucking line kind of legendary lord, which is, Cathay should have an option for that. Games Workshop always did a good job with having the legendary lords, and heroes do a very good job of representing their culture and different aspects of their culture. And with Miao Ying and Zhao Ming, we already see that. Because Miao Ying does a good job of representing Cathay as holding the line against the predations of chaos and being kind of more hard-nosed and tough, like I said, while Zhao Ming is a little more literally and figuratively experimental and a little bit more out there. So it's kind of representing how Cathay defends against the hordes of chaos from the north and have been defending against them quite adamantly for 7,000 or 8,000 years in the lore. And Zhao Ming represents Cathay's more experimental scientific community that we get to see through a lot of their units as well. Speaking of which, I like the choice of... I'm glad that Crave Assembly and Games Workshop decided not to touch most of the Cathay stuff that was talked about in Tamarcon. For those who don't know, the Tamarcon Forge World expansion for the tabletop had a section where it talked about Sail the Faithless, fighting the Cathayans at the Tower of Asher. But the Cathayan army that was described in the Tamarkan books was mostly Japanese mythology. Like, for instance, Shugenja, I believe, is a old Japanese religion. And along similar lines, like, they were fighting Tengu and Ogre Samurai, and I forget what else. Ashigaru. So, I'm glad they've ignored all but one choice there. The Shugengan, I think, is a really interesting idea. I really dig the way they have... Like, part of the fun of Warhammer has always been that they are taking history and completely fantasizing it and mixing it with stuff that's just outright complete bullshit fantasy like most of Chaos. And with Cathay, they've done a good job of implementing the bizarro kind of Cathayan nobility throughout... Oh, not Cathayan, now I'm just mixing up the words. I guess they would have been called Cathay at the time. The bizarro Chinese nobility throughout, like, a lot of their medieval and classical periods, where the Confucian idea of there being no nobility except for the imperial family started to get pushed. Now, I'm not an expert on Chinese history, and I'm sure there have been plenty of times where they just had regular nobility comparable to that of Europe at the time. But I think it does a very neat job of representing, like, the true nobility of Cathay. The only real heredity in Cathay are the Dragon Emperor, Moon Empress, their kids, who are all also dragons, and then the dragon-blooded descendants of the kids, which are the Shugengan, and then below them, the Jade Longma Riders. Are they still called Jade Longma Riders? I remember they were called Jade Longma Riders in the first reveal, but I think they may have changed that name later. Anyways, so I think the Shugenga are a really neat touch. I also think the Shugenga are a really cool way of handling the high magic, dark magic thing with Cathay. Because one of the few things we did know about Cathay, going back to the Ogre Kingdom's army books, was we knew that Cathayans were seemingly the only humans in the Warhammer world who had figured out how to use high magic and dark magic. Which is really big in the Warhammer lore, because it's supposed to be that only elves live long enough to use that. And if you're a lore nerd asshole like me, that kind of raises questions of, like, how are these humans able to achieve that then? And the answer is they're not really human. The Shugengan are apparently so much dragon-blooded that they live long enough to learn that kind of magic. Which is cool. That's a cool way of handling it while still making it feel kind of true to it. Because it still sticks with the lore. The Shugengan aren't really human, but it also is still keeping that one idea from the Ogres of, but they're human enough. The Lord Magistrates, I'm interested to see what happens with these guys. Because the description here implies that they're not going to be so good in direct combat. They're not going to be a regular beat stick lord. Which Creative Assembly, I think, wants to kind of veer away from having regular beat stick lords and heroes. They've always kind of been the most boring options in Warhammer. And I think that they're veering away from them. The Lord Magistrate has a sword on him, but he seems to be more about buffing nearby friendly units. So that could be pretty interesting. Other than that, yeah, he does look like a considerably more boring option compared to the Shugengan. But I appreciate that they're also representing the thing of, like, a lot of Cathay's leadership outside of the dragon-blooded nobility being these appointed officials, guys who probably went through tests and, you know, did well on exams or what have you, right? Because so much of Warhammer Fantasy is exaggerated versions of real-life cultures. And real-life culture, you know, China, several times throughout their history, when everybody else was still relying on nobility, China several times did try to have leadership that was decided by exams and tests and so on. Now, I think that sometimes they didn't bother, and sometimes it didn't work. But still, when you're making a more fantasized version of China for Warhammer, it makes a lot of sense to implement that as a feature, at least partly because it's cool and unique on its own, but also because it separates Cathay from the other cultures of the Warhammer world, which are more reliant on traditional nobility that's hereditary. The heroes, they get two varieties of caster, the Alchemist and the Astromancer. These both seem neat to me. I will say it seems a bit odd that both of the heroes Cathay gets access to are casters. I mean, it does kind of explain why Zinc is so intent on getting into Cathay, because there's apparently so much magic there. But it is a little bit weird. I do appreciate, though, that they're separating them. That the Astromancers and Alchemists will have different things they do outside of just having different spell lores. Because the Astromancers have the unique mount, they get the Wuxing War Compass, while the Alchemists can only ride horses, but the alchemists get the variety of special buffs they can perform through their potions and their poisons and what have you. So I think that's all very, very cool. I am very curious where the rest of Cathay's heroes will go, as I think it's inevitable we're going to see some kind of hero that isn't a caster for Cathay, and I think it's inevitable that Cathay will wind up getting more caster heroes that handle different lores. Because so far, like, Cathay, it's unusual for a human race to only get 2 kinds of lores for their caster heroes. Bretonnia still gets 3. So there'll be more down the road, but these are good enough to start with. And especially, I guess it does make sense to have both types of hero be casters, considering the whole Cathayan magic gimmick, where the more casters they have, the stronger their magic is. Which I'm interested to see in action. But these guys are both cool. I also like how they represent a cultural contrast between the Astromancers, who are more traditional, and they learn from the Dragon Emperor himself, and the Alchemists, who are more experimental, and technically they're considered to be witches in Cathay, according to the lore we've seen so far, but Zhao Ming and the Moon Empress seem to protect them, and Zhao Ming has all of them holed up in his House of Mysteries, I think is what it's called. I can't remember exact details from the Andy Hall interview, but there was a lot of good stuff when he was on the Lorebeards podcast with Great Book of Grudges and Lore Master of Sotek. That was a very good watch. If you are interested in Cathay lore, like I am, it is a treasure trove. Peasant Long Spearmen. These guys probably should have just been called Peasant Spearmen, but they threw the long in there because Ashigaru Pike meme from Total War Shogun 2. Which I don't blame them, but I will say that's probably not the meme they want to invoke, because I doubt these guys are going to be anywhere near as effective as Ashigaru Pikemen are. I do really like the design here, though. This is a really cool design for these guys. It's, like, it does a good job of getting across, like, what the average Joe in Cathay looks like, while still the shoulder pad and the armored helmet give enough of appearance that they are a proper militia, and Cathay isn't just pulling a complete Bretonnia and sending their peasants to die in droves. They've also got some pretty damn good calves, I gotta say. I like the more kind of cartoonish style that we're seeing in a lot of Cathay and a lot of, well, just Warhammer 3 units altogether. And Cathay's peasants seem to be a bit more emphasized to me. I also like that with Cathay, they're keeping a balance here, because we've got professional warriors in the Jade Warriors and Celestial Dragon Guard, and we've got peasant warriors here. I like that they're presenting kind of a contrast here, that Cathay isn't fully like Cathay is a bit like Bretonnia in that they do view their peasantry as a bit expendable, and they will throw them into the meat grinder if they have to. But at the same time, they're not like Bretonnia, where they are entirely just thinking, oh, infantry, dishonorable, let's just send the peasants in to die for us. Even if we don't really have to, we'll send the peasants in to die for us. And even when the Bretonians have professional infantry, like the men-at-arms, they kind of suck. Cathay, there's more of a divide. They got the peasants there, who are generally expected to sacrifice their lives or just provide cheap support, and a core of proper elite, well, not quite elite in the case of the Jade Warriors, but a core of properly trained professional troops. The Jade Warriors and the Celestial Dragon Guard both have very cool designs. I said that as soon as I first saw the Cathay trailer. I would say they are downright sick. I also find it a bit weird that they are going so hard on, well, hang on, I guess I'll get to that in a little bit. Peasant Archers. I do find it a bit funky, though. Well, not funky. Funky's the wrong word. A bit interesting that Cathay only has one variety of melee infantry that should really be used against other infantry. They get Spearmen, Peasant Spearmen, Jade Warrior Halberdiers, Celestial Dragon Guard Halberdiers. The only kind of, like, close to anti-infantry unit that Cathay gets are Jade Warriors with swords. I think that's a bit curious. Though it does make sense that they get so many halberds, as they're going to be fighting a lot of Warriors of Chaos. They're going to need the armor piercing. I guess it's because there's so many monsters that come down from the north. But it's going to make for a very interesting setup in gameplay, because it means that Cathay will suffer a bit if they go against a very infantry-heavy army. They have to rely more on missiles than they do for melee. You can take a melee-heavy build as Cathay and take on large units like ogres and monsters and so on. But going against, like, a corn player that spams loads of bloodletters, you're going to need loads of missile support, because your infantry just isn't going to cut it. They don't have the anti-infantry power. I think that is, interesting. God, every time I record, I'm so sorry about that. Alright, here we go. These ladies, I'm curious about these ladies, because they're not supposed to be regular peasants. They're wearing specific uniforms. I wonder if they're supposed to be like a representation specifically of, like, if Cathay's got some kind of engineers guild that is way more numerous than, say, the Empire's engineer guild or the Dwarf engineer guild. Because if these were just regular peasants, they'd probably just reuse the same peasant model. But I do appreciate that Cathay gets gunpowder, because, I mean, the real world China invented gunpowder. But I also appreciate that they don't just get regular handgunners. That's still the Empire's thing and the Dwarf's thing. And Dogs of War thing, whenever they come, I guess. Instead, Cathay gets blunderbusseers and snipers. And they will be the first human faction to get Jezzails, I believe, because the Skaven already got theirs, but Skaven are Skaven, they aren't human. So, I think that's neat. It's a nice setup. It's especially fun with the setup that the Cathay and Harmony mechanic offers. Keeping the shotgunners close to your infantry and trying to focus on having fun with gunpowder formations, or maybe having the Iron Hail gunners get in a shot and then having your infantry charge in, and so on. I think that's neat. And the Jade Warriors, I forgot about this guy. This guy looks kind of silly. The Jade Warriors, yeah, they also look sick. I find it interesting that there's so much hybrid infantry in Warhammer 3. Because that's Kislev's main gimmick. That's Kislev's whole thing. Kislev only gets 2 units, I think, of non-hybrid infantry in the 2 variants of Zargard. Everything else that's infantry for Kislev is hybrid. And for Cathay, Cathay's also getting some solid selections of hybrid infantry, because they're getting Jade Warrior crossbowmen and the Celestial Dragon crossbowmen, who are both certainly going to be at least a part of hybrid infantry. They may not necessarily be as outright strong as their equivalents, the melee equivalents, but they're probably going to be able to keep up at least somewhat. And Tzeentch, again, loads of hybrid infantry. Nurgle has some hybrid infantry units, which I was not expecting. So I think that Creative Assembly might have cracked onto a simple way to make the units more unique, maybe. Cavalry, Peasant Horsemen, we've not got to see them in action, but we can probably take a guess at how they look. Just good old-fashioned light cavalry. The Jade Lancers, who do not look like that. That is the wrong picture. Okay, the Great Longma Riders. Okay, they're not called Jade Longma Riders anymore. So, Cathay's cavalry selection is better than I remember. I forgot that they have Peasant Horsemen. Cathay's actually got a solid cavalry selection. They've got some nice light cavalry, some nice heavy cavalry, and they've got flying cavalry. They're obviously not going to be competing with Bretonnia or the Empire, but they shouldn't, because Bretonnia and the Empire are supposed to be strong because of their cavalry. Kislev as well. But Cathay is still a human race, and humans in Warhammer always have good cavalry. So it's nice to see that, especially seeing as how I'm a big cavalry fan myself. The Longmas look sick. I am very curious about the lore behind them. I don't think they have revealed exactly what the Longma are. I do think it's also sick that the Longma Riders are the dragon-blooded who either turn down the opportunity to become a Shugengan or maybe are too distant from the bloodline to learn high or dark magic, but they're still effectively Cathayan nobility. I think that's really cool. The Terracotta Sentinel is badass. Nothing needs to be said about it because it was the thing that everybody was like hyped up for Cathay. Everybody was getting in there specifically for Terracotta robot soldiers because it's just so sick. I like that they are. I like that they were built by the Celestial Dragon Emperor a long ass time ago and are just now waking up. That's also a neat lore thing. The Sky Lanterns are cute. I think I've already said my piece about them. They're kind of an oddball unit, but I think it takes a lot of oddball units to make Cathay feel unique. So, good. And the Sky Lanterns and the Sky Junks. It's weird that there's 2 variants of Sky Lantern, I gotta admit. Though I'm sure it'll work out in gameplay. And let's see, the 2 artillery choices. They can choose from the rocket launcher and the cannon. That's neat. I was hoping they would get those 2 and none else, because those are the 2 that make most sense for real-world China, especially because the rocket launcher in Warhammer is specifically the Hellstorm? The Hellstorm rocket battery that the Empire gets access to is, I'm pretty sure, specifically stated in like one of the later editions to be a rip-off of the Cathayan rocket launchers. So I like that. That's a nice little send up to the lore to have that be there. And the Wuxing War Compass, which I still don't know what it does. This was revealed a good couple months ago. I don't know what the fuck it does. what does it do? It's a bound spellcaster unit. Okay, and it still can function as a chariot. Okay, so yes, what it does is it's a bound spellcaster, like what are the Slanesh soul-stealing dark elf cavalry guys? Warlocks, something or other. Darkfire Warlocks or something that Dark Elves get access to? Yeah, those guys. Or Zotes for Wood Elves. There you go. Bound caster. I like the Cathay roster a lot. Cathay is certainly going to be the first race that I play on launch. Mostly because I really want to see them in action. Because it is crazy that Cathay is happening at all. It is a massive lore change that they even exist, really. Other than just being somewhere on the periphery. So Cathay is going to be first up for me, undeniably. I will say they are probably not the race that is most suited to my playstyle. I think they'll probably play a bit more of a aggressive Cathay than is supposed to. Cathay looks like a very defensive army, and I like dwarfs every now and then, but most of the time I don't play dwarfs. Dwarfs are very defensive. I'm more likely, I do think that the race I'm going to end up spending the most time with out of the Warhammer 3 launch selection is probably going to be Kislev or Ogres, because they're both a lot more aggressive and more my style. Or maybe Slanesh. Maybe Slanesh. Anyways, let's move on to the next blog entry. Sieges. This was the big one. The big one. So, Sieges in Total War Warhammer 1 and 2 suck. I've already got a video or two talking about that. I may have 3 videos talking about that. I don't remember for certain. But this was the big one. The game-defining one. Because Sieges kind of defined Total War. And it's been the biggest problem Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2 have had, is the fact that Sieges fucking suck in those games. So for Warhammer 3, the fact that they've changed it, big feature to advertise. And spoilers, I like this. I don't think there were too many people who were upset about this, actually. I was kind of shocked by that, because I'm kind of glad I missed out on a lot of the Warhammer 3 news, because there's a lot of people talking very stupidly, and if I had been there for it, I might have said something I shouldn't have. Picked fights with people I shouldn't have. Anyways, the Siege rework, it's massive. The Siege maps altogether, way fucking bigger. Hang on, let me crack open this picture. Yeah, much bigger. Like, it's a world of difference. I have seen a couple people be pissed about how much bigger the maps are now, because that means that they inevitably get left partly empty. All the footage we've seen, though, of the Sieges so far have been one 20-man army versus another 20-unit army. And I don't think that's entirely the fair... Oh, excuse me. Hell, less than 20-man, I think. Entirely the fair way to look at things, because these maps are generally built to be a bit bigger and associate with bigger armies. In Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2, because Siege maps are so small, it looks terrible when you've got 3 or 4 stacks fighting in the same battle. God help you if you've somehow managed to get 8 stacks fighting in a siege, because there just isn't enough space on the wall or in the city for that many units. And it's just shit going on everywhere, and it just becomes this big cuddle puddle of units clobbering the crap out of each other. So the fact that Warhammer 3 has went with much bigger siege maps, already on that basis, way better. This is much better on the basis of the fact that there's way more space for maneuvering. There's much more space to choose to make your stand as the defender. There's much more space to come in as the attacker. It looks like it might actually feel like Total War Sieges. Like, this isn't even the complete picture of the city, by the way. It goes back a little further beyond this. So, it's a lot of room. It addresses a lot of the concerns I had, which one of the biggest ones just undeniably was the maps are too fucking small. Other thing, less towers. I'm fine with this. The towers will probably still have the massive range that they do in the game right now, but now there are avenues offered where you can attack the city where the towers can't hit you, which circumvents a lot of the problems I had, and probably gives you more opportunity to hit the enemy towers. There are a lot more gates, a lot more ways into the city. Once you get into the city, there's so much more city to fight over, so many more city blocks to take, and when you take one of the control points, you can build up supply points as the defender. As the attacker, you're just denying. As the defender, you can spend it to build the buildables from the survival mode, which is also a very nice addition if you ask me. Because a lot of people wanted layered defense from Medieval 2, And I think, yeah, Shogun also had the layered defense feature. And this is about as best the way they can implement it, I think. Mixing it with the deployables feature and giving them more of a meta game to it of building up supplies. And I think the supplies are also a brilliant feature, and the deployables that can be built are also a brilliant feature, because it deals with one of the biggest problems with artillery in sieges on the attacker side. Because when you're attacking and you use artillery in a siege in Total War games, it means it's going to come out pretty slow. The battle, I mean. Because artillery takes a while to crack open the walls. And I think that's part of why Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2 made it where towers have virtually infinite range, is because they wanted to discourage the players from using artillery in sieges. And that was annoying. It limited the player what they want to do. And I think with Warhammer 3 they've recognized a way to deal with that and make it where things are still exciting for the defender and there's more of a motivation for the attacker to rush even if they have the artillery advantage, is the supply mechanic, making it where the longer the early stages of a siege go on, the more the defender gets to build up within the city. And that is just a lot of fun, the idea that you can spend more time having your artillery crack open the walls and crack open gates, but for every moment that you spend cracking open the outside of the city, the inside of the city is getting much more densely defended. I think that's a really cool idea. I think there's a lot... I think that Warhammer 3 could have siege problems on release. I absolutely concede that there are things that have not been accounted for here. But I think that we are now in a spot where, for one thing, I think Grave Assembly has avoided trying to fix sieges in Warhammer 1 or Warhammer 2, partly because because it became a feature for Warhammer 3. Right? I'm not going to say they were holding it back so they could sell it later, though that is a possibility. But rather, I think that at some point the Warhammer 3 team probably told the Warhammer 2 DLC team, don't touch sieges, we're going to be changing them entirely in Warhammer 3. Whereas Warhammer 3 is out, there's not going to be a Warhammer 4. So Warhammer 3, the sieges, I think that if there are problems with them, the DLC team can fix those problems, and the DLC team for Warhammer 2 did a fantastic job. So for Warhammer 3, I would expect that pattern to keep. Alright, there we go. Let me pull out of that map. Was there anything else I wanted to talk about? I'm very curious to see the individual deployables that all the various races get, because there can be a lot of variety there in terms of how races handle things. Presumably, it looks like they're all going to get the same basic barriers, but they're going to get different relics and traps, I think, and different towers, which could be very fun. Like, we already see that Cathay's towers will shoot, like, rockets, and I assume that it's going to be different for other races, because Bretonnia's not going to shoot fucking rockets. Bretonnia's probably going to have towers that shoot cows. That'll be a lot of fun. And also, minor settlement battles are back. They are full 360-degree sieges, rather than the 180s that we will be getting for regular siege battles, which I don't mind, but a lot of people might, I don't know. Minor settlement battles will be 360 degrees, and they will have the survival deployables feature. That is awesome. That means that Norska will be way more playable. Because that is the primary problem that Norska has right now, is that defense is really difficult for them. And really, if settlement defense became more viable for Norska would instantly shoot from being one of the lower quality races in terms of campaigns to one of the highest quality. Because Norska is already fantastic from a campaign perspective, except for settlement defense. So I like that. It's all very cool on the siege front. Let's see. Kairos Fate Weaver lore, I don't care. Okay, excuse me, I skipped ahead. Okay, the Cathay campaign mechanics. I was not expecting to see campaign mechanics as early as we did, but we got it. So Cathay's got the harmony system. Every building and every technology has a certain amount of either, I assume, yin or yang attached to it, or light harmony or dark harmony. Probably yin and yang. And you want to keep the meter in the middle. For every time that you build something yin, you want to build something yang, and vice versa. If you keep the meter in the middle, you not only get higher growth and money and all this and that, you also get access to the ability to summon ancestor spirits in battles. So it's more of an anti-cheese mechanic for Cathay, which I'm not going to complain about. I'm sure it's going to be a problem for someone else's YouTube channel, but I'm not going to complain about it. I think it's a neat idea. And I like the idea of summoning ancestor spirits in battle. That's a nice send-up to the old bit of lore from Ooh, way back in ancient days of Warhammer when the Genevieve Duodon novels or whatever, I believe there was a bit where she fought against that Dion Chung guy that was pretending to be the Cathayan ambassador to the Empire. And to try and fight her, he summoned the ancestor spirit of his grandfather or something. I forget what. So that's a nice send-up there. And it's also neat that the Cathayans are broadly kind of atheists, except for the ancestor worship because of the Dragon Emperor and his hatred of the gods. So I think that's all very cool. The Wuxing Compass seems a bit weird. You can pick a focus as long as the focus is active. It has an active effect. Hang on, let's just pull this up. Alright, the Warpstone Desert decreases all corruption types, which now Untainted is not a corruption type of its own, but rather a reduction of corruption, which is neat. I like that. And reduces the winds of magic across Cathay, and applies to all Cathay apparently. When pushed to the Great Bastion, all Cathayan factions get increased recruitment capacity and a unique army ability with it. Seems to call down a meteor, I think. When pushed to the Celestial Lake, it increases all building income and increases the winds of magic throughout Cathay. And while it's pushed towards the Dragon Emperor's Wrath, it causes big attrition to every army that is in Cathay past the Great Bastion, I believe. That's kind of ambiguous. It almost makes it sound like armies in the Eastern Steppe are going to take damage. That would be dumb. There's also passive effects for the Dragon Emperor's Wrath, Celestial Lake, and Great Bastion, but not for Warpstone Desert. Dragon Emperor's Wrath increases control. I don't need to explain all this, do I? Look at me. You can probably see it all on screen. I think the Wuxing Compass is a neat idea. It gets across the Dragon Emperor's kind of scheming from Wei Jin, which scheming may not be the right kind of word. It makes him sound like a Skaven, but it gets across the Dragon Emperor no longer really coming out and directly doing things, either because he's too busy planning or, like the other dragons, he's gotten too sleepy, but still playing his games in a little way to try and help the rest of Cathay and help his kids. And I believe it's also kind of playing into the harmony thing, the balance thing of Cathay, because you want to generally try and keep all three of these to have meters balanced so that you get the maximum amount of control, growth, defensive supplies, and casualty replenishment. That's all very cool. I like all of this. It will be interesting to see in gameplay. That's where, when the rubber hits the road, is where we're going to see how much that mechanic actually works. It may not really work that well when we actually get our hands on it. So that's something to keep in mind. It is also going to raise some interesting questions about how possible it is to try and top up all 3 meters. Because I don't know how possible it is to top up all 4 meters as Norska when you've got to deal with the gods mechanic. I've never got that far in a Norska campaign where I even really bother with it. Norska campaign is actually a bit weird because there's late game concerns like that. The Ivory Road sounds like a weird mechanic. It's kind of vague, not vaguely described, but it's given in terms, but we don't get to see the actual meat and potatoes of it. So we'll have to see how it actually works once we actually probably get to see the Cathay Let's Play in January, probably. But it sounds like it could be interesting, because as long as it gives you proper rewards. If you don't get enough money from it, this will be a nothing mechanic that people don't bother with. But it sounds cool. The idea of Cathayan hordes that are just focused on making money and trade, and you can't use them in war. And you have to deal with the various problems on the Ivory Road, like ogres and chaos dwarfs. So that all sounds very cool. The Great Bastion as a mechanic sounds quite neat. It sounds like it's going to be a lot like the Wood Elf Magic Forest mechanic, with each of the gates being a place that you build up for big benefits, but the more you build them up, the more you have to deal with foreign attacks on them. I think it's good that Crib Assembly did this, because there's a very good chance that the player, like the AI, will not attack the Great Bastion unless they're forced to, because the AI in Total War Warhammer is a complete coward, which I think is one of the bigger things Crib Assembly should work on fixing, but they might not. And this is a way to force them to do it. It's also going to be a bit weird because the Miao Ying campaign, you start out at the Great Bastion, and you're probably going to be, as soon as the campaign starts, pushing out and taking land in the Chaos Wastes. So I guess this is also a way for Miao Ying to have to worry about the Great Bastion, even once she's technically pushed past it and taken the territory. The Chaos Hordes will still appear there. It'll be a little bit weird and be kind of confusing, but it is what it is. And in terms of tech tree, Cathay is focused on a middle path that has no harmony balance to it, and there is a lower path that focuses on yin, I think, and a upper path that focuses on yang. Oh, what's the... Okay, yes, the lower path is yin and the upper path is yang, right? Because that's the Moon Empress's name is right there, Chua Yin. Okay. That's a neat idea. I'm glad that the tech trees are starting to be more implemented directly into the mechanics of a race more cohesively, and they aren't just being something that Crev Assembly just kind of farts out like, we gotta have a tech tree, we'll just put this here. And they've been doing a good job of it. I mean, I don't think it's ever going to get more hardcore than the Tomb Kings, where the tech tree is pretty well the core mechanic. But for Cathay and the other Warhammer 3 factions, it looks like they've done a very good job of making it feel like something that's a core gameplay mechanic, though not the core, perhaps. Let's see. And then they next did Zinch campaign mechanics. Boy, this is a long video for no one. Yeah, I'll just throw it up on the channel anyways. It's something. So, Zinch, right. So, Zinch was the first of the Chaos races they revealed the campaign mechanics for. They got the Grimoires, which is their unique resource they collect. That makes sense. Zinch likes to collect books and knowledge. He's all about that shit. And then he can use that for a lot of the stuff that spies would do in old Total War games. Makes sense for Zinch, though. He's pretty well the god of spies, I guess. And he can do a lot of cool things here. I won't talk about a whole lot of them, but the transfer settlement button, which I imagine is the one that everyone looked at and was like, holy shit, you can just take a settlement for free? That one is interesting. That one makes me wonder about the possibility of them adding the ability to buy and sell settlements in diplomacy, because I think that's one of the bigger missing features for Warhammer 2 that should be added in Warhammer 3. And if they are focusing on the idea now that you can just take settlements for a certain expenditure of money in terms of gameplay, then that could be a pretty good sign we might get settlement trading, which would be very nice. The rest of this is all very cool stuff, though not necessarily surprising stuff. Let's see. Winds of Magic Manipulation, there's going to be more to talk about there, boy. But the Winds of Magic Manipulation sounds like a very cool way to handle Zinch's whole magic thing. I am interested to see how it will actually be implemented mechanically, because we have seen that some of Zinch's buildings will expel Winds of Magic, but not pull it. So it makes me wonder if it's like a kind of web thing that Zinch has to do between his various settlements, is try and set up where they all are giving proper bonuses to nearby settlements. I remember that the old versus new mod did something similar with Albion that I thought was really cool, which, that's another video, oh boy. But Winds of Magic I can talk about more later. Corruption, Unholy Manifestations in the Great Game, right, this all debuted with the Zinch thing. So, the Unholy Manifestations mechanic. I think this is a very cool thing. I know I'm singing CA's praises and just sucking their dick all video, get used to it. This is a very cool way of handling the way that the 4 Chaos Gods are all waging war for domination of the world. And it specifically encourages you to throw around a lot of corruption, even if otherwise you wouldn't benefit too much from it, and just spread your given gods' love across the world. And I like that it all is just different ways of handling the direct manifestations of the Chaos Gods into the physical world. I don't think any of these are huge changes. These are all kind of stuff you expect from rituals. The ones where you just have an army sit there and build up money, or in this case grimoires, though, is kind of interesting. Cults are another big one. Cults are one that I was kind of curious about. I think that we all had the idea in our heads when the Under Empire feature, the Under City feature for the Skaven was added fucking 3 years ago now, I think. We all had the idea in our heads of, oh, this could be used to make chaos cults. And Creative Assembly agreed. Kind of a surprise for me, though, because I kind of figured Khorne might not be so well built for that. Khorne gets cults too, though. We'll get to him in a little bit, I guess. For Zinch, though, yeah, cults are going to be a big part of it. I mean, Zinch in the lore has probably the most cults. And they look pretty cool for Zinch. Got a bunch of stuff that builds money, builds grimoires, relies on magic, spreads magic to other provinces. That's all very cool. The teleportation stance sounds like a motherfucker. I'm glad it's tied to the tech tree, because that means the AI will almost never use it, because the AI doesn't know how to use the tech tree, if memory serves. Or if they do, they just pick techs at random, because it's the AI. But if you have to play a versus campaign, and the guy you're playing against has the teleport mechanic, ooh. Yeah, take the Skaven Beastman Stalk mechanic and make it where it's combined with the Underway mechanic. Go fuck yourself, apparently. The tech tree sounds cool, though. I like the Chaos tech trees all having a little passage here on the preferred number of each of the Chaos gods. So we get 9 for each here. And all of the techs are clustered in groups of 9. That's really cool. I like that. I like that a lot. Tzeentch, I was not like Khorne and Tzeentch. I was not so excited about until I actually started to see these blogs. Tzeentch sounds like quite a bit of fun in his campaign blog, but Khorne, when I get to him, ooh. All right, let's see. Oh, Kislev's campaign blog. Yeah, I guess I gotta hit them. So with Kislev's campaign blog, they do sound like they sound a little bit closer to your usual mundane campaign, but they should. Both them and Cathay should be a little bit closer to your usual mundane Total War campaign, because they are just humans, you know? Ah, thank God for hydration. And the Empire and Bretonnia, for instance, are usually a little bit closer to just your regular Total War campaign, because they're just humans. So I think for Kislev, that is a smart choice. I like the mechanics they've implemented. Devotion, build up devotion to the gods. If it gets too low, Chaos invades. If it gets real high, you can spend it on various things. I think that's cool. You can spend it on buildings. You can spend it on the rituals, which I'll get to in a second. You can spend it on the political stuff, which I'll get to in a second. Here we go, the rituals, yes. So you can spend devotion to perform one of 4 rituals to the gods, one each to Salyak, Daj, Ursun, or Tor. That is a really cool way of implementing the Kislevite gods into the game and educating people on the Kislevite lore. Each of the rituals summons a snowstorm that causes attrition, and they all have different effects. These all sound cool. I will say the one that does sound... I do think that people are going to be spamming the ritual of Daj constantly because increased income. Like, why would you ever not have that ritual active? It may pose an interesting question because if the devotion gets too low, it summons a chaos invasion. But for most players, especially guys like Legend of Total War, they'd see that as a good thing because they want more armies to beat for money and experience. So it'll be interesting to see how that works when rubber hits the road. Let's see. And the spiritual conflict for Kislev. There's another cool one, though it's one that seems kind of interesting for the future. The 2 legendary lords at launch for Kislev have a mechanic where they are basically racing each other to earn the approval of Kislev, the people of Kislev, and they can earn more approval, I guess by doing missions, I assume, or by just spending money or devotion. I think that's a really cool mechanic. It's simplistic for the thing, but, I mean, it's not too bad. Sometimes stuff is better off simplistic and streamlined. And they get various rewards for it, including the ability to start confederating the other Kislevite factions. I like it, but it just raises so many questions about there are not going to be 2 Kislevite legendary lords by the end of this game's development. There's going to be 6 or 7. This UI does not have space for like 6 or 7 meters. I assume that right now, it's just going to stay as an exclusive mechanic for Katarn and Coastal Team. That when they add Boris, inevitably they will add Boris. I don't care how many times they say he's dead. That motherfucker is not dead. He's in the concept art. He's the most iconic character for Kislev after Katarn. He's in. Boris might not have that mechanic because his rule isn't really opposed. And whenever they inevitably add an Ungol legendary lord, whether it's a hag witch or just a regular ass Ungol step badass, they probably won't have that mechanic either because they may not be even looking to get the full devotion of the full support of Kislev. I think it's interesting though. And if it does just stay a unique mechanic for Katarn and Coastal Tin, that will give more motivation to continue playing Katarn and Coastal Tin, even after other legendary lords are added to the game, which may have their own unique mechanics that Katarn and Coastal Tin won't have access to. Because that is a problem Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2 have had, that several of the DLC and free LC legendary lords have had such unique and interesting legendary lord mechanics that it doesn't feel like there's much of a reason to play. Like, it doesn't really feel like there's much of a reason to play Krokgar when you can play Gorok and get Krok. Or play Tehenowin and get all of his crazy rituals with those crazy like items you can get that make your lords and heroes OP as fuck. It doesn't feel like there's much of a reason to play Krokgar when you can play Oxyotl and teleport around the world. So if this stays as a mechanic for Katarn and Coastal Tin, that could make them interesting still late into the game's life cycle. So that'd be neat. Ottomans, much like the Ivory Road trade caravan mechanic for Cathay, we are only given a description. We are not shown actual screenshots or given any hard numbers. It sounds interesting that they are just now implementing the kind of mechanic of handling governors. I'm glad that they're doing it for Kislev and trying to handle the idea of Kislev having the intricate political system it does. And I like that you can recruit the Ottomans for a little bit to lead armies. I'm curious if the Ottomans will look any different from regular boyars. I'm going to assume they won't. But oh, there's something going on over there. Anyways, it sounds like a cool mechanic. And I like that they build up XP that can be spent on various things to improve the region. The cool thing about the Ottoman mechanic is that it gets across the idea that Katarin is trying to overhaul Kislevite politics and put things more in her favor. Because that is the thing with Katarin in the lore, is that she's trying to change Kislev to be more directly under her control and less decentralized. So I like that. And the Ice Court, this is the Bizarro feature. It kind of makes sense for Katarin, the idea being you can recruit lords and heroes and specifically build them in such a way that they get the traits you want. It's a neat idea. It's weird that Constantine gets it, because he seems to not like the Ice Court. It's going to be weird when the other legendary lords get it. Jesus, there's anarchy out there. And I do have to wonder, is this just testing the waters to retroactively go back and give this same mechanic to the Empire and call it Colleges of Magic, right? Because that would make a lot of sense there. Either which way. And the tech tree for Kislev is done in a very interesting way. It's divided up into segments for the regular land of Kislev, the city of Kislev, the city of Prague, the city of Erengrad. I think that's a very cute way of doing things, personally, because so much of Kislev is built around there being 3 big cities and then just the surrounding oblasts. And the cities are very much the cultural centers of Kislev, because while life on the oblast is, important as an idea of what Kislev is, and the people on the oblast are supposed to be who defend so much of Kislev from the Chaos Warriors and the Norskins, the cities of Kislev are built up in the lore as being these great cosmopolitan places of tremendous innovation and intellectualism, relative to the rest of Kislev at least. And I like that they've handled it this way by having the technology be related to those cities, and also encouraging the player to try and reunite Kislev, rather than saying, I got the important city, I'm good. Because that can happen, perhaps, with some players. I'd imagine it especially happens with some people who are just trying to play for maximum efficiency. Kislev, like all the I'm just going to go ahead and spoil for anyone who was wondering, maybe he's going to at some point say that he thinks some campaign mechanics are shit. No, I like all the campaign mechanics we've got to see so far. And as I keep saying, things might be different when the rubber hits the road. But so far, in concept, this all sounds cool. I'm sure there will be at least one big problem when the game releases, because nothing ever releases perfect. And the DLC team has had to clean up messes and fix problems for every Total War game that's come so far. So long as there's been a DLC team, I guess. Anyways, Khorne. Khorne I'm very happy with. I am very surprised by how happy I am with Khorne's campaign mechanics. He's got the skulls and the skull throne. That sounds just like your usual stuff. You build up a unique resource. You can spend it on rituals to buff your armies. Yada, yada, yada. Here's the big thing. Blood calls. When Khorne takes out a settlement, he can choose to occupy it for a massive cost in skulls. I like that. Khorne should not be, camping out everywhere. But at the same time, Khorne shouldn't be a hold. Yeah, what was that? Khorne should not be a horde. He should be able to occupy a territory so that other people don't just swoop in and take all of his land as soon as he steps out. And Khorne worshippers do settle from time to time. They're not just all blood-crazed maniacs constantly going until they die, because Khorne's worshippers would die off pretty quickly. Sometimes Khorne worshippers logically have to settle down and have kids. It happens. But at a considerable cost, so you aren't just doing it everywhere and making a complete land-based empire. So I think that's really cool. You can also take the skulls for the Skull Throne option when you raise a settlement. And that just completely raises the settlement. You get a bunch of skulls. Same old, same old. And then there's the Blood for the Blood God option. This one right here. That one is rad. Whenever you raise a settlement using the Blood for the Blood God option, it spawns pretty well one of the Death Crew's armies from the Dark Elves, but you control it. It doesn't replenish and it can't recruit, but other than that, it can do everything that a Khorne army can. So it makes Khorne genuinely, like, if this winds up working out well, then Khorne will actually feel like you're spreading a hate plague across the Warhammer world. That is sick. That is the exact way Khorne should play. Like, Cathay is going to be my first play because I want to see so much of their lore. Khorne might be my second play just because I want to see his campaign mechanics. That is such a sick idea of a campaign. Jesus, it's going nuts out there. Bloodletting, right? They have every Khorne army has a meter. They need to be engaged in so much fighting or else they start taking attrition. That just makes sense. It was annoying when the Greenskins had them added as a mechanic, though I trust that Creative Assembly now has more wits to them and will handle it better than they did before. Unholy Manifestations and Cults, yep, we see the same system that Zinch had here. For Khorne, it doesn't look that special. Oh, this one was actually really cool. Eternal War spawns a small Khornate army to attack your own army. That one is specifically there for the guys like Legend of Total War who deliberately farm rebellions and such. But it's a cool idea that is very fitting for Khorne. That he is deliberately just picking fights with his own dudes because he just loves fighting that much. That is a great way of making you feel like Khorne while also encouraging you to use certain gameplay mechanics that as the other races you'd have to cheese to get, but for Khorne it's just part of his core gameplay. That's really cool. Khorne gets all of this stuff like Call of Battle that encourages him to play more like Torox, where you rampage across the world and raise a shit zillion settlements in a single turn. So that's neat. Torox was almost certainly a testing ground for that. So I'm glad that they are using the lessons they've learned from Warhammer 2 directly at the start of Warhammer 3. And all this stuff, make money, raise the settlement. Khorne has cults. Like I said, that's kind of a surprise, because in the lore, Khorne doesn't really get that many cults, because Khorne's guys aren't that subtle. But these all make sense. Hideouts, fighting pits, warriors' lodges, and arenas. Those are all the kind of places that Khorne would do. And the arena, no, what does it do? It destroys the cult upon completion, but teleports your faction leader and their army to the settlement. Right, I forgot about that. That sounds amazing and stupid. As Khorne, and seemingly as all the Chaos guys, it's going to be a big strategy, I bet, to get cultists as soon as possible and just send them throughout the southern Warhammer world. Because you're going to start out in the Chaos Waste as the Chaos factions. That just makes sense. But start sending out your cultists early in the game and start setting up cults throughout the Warhammer world, so you can just, as soon as you get into the late game and you get really strong, you can just start teleporting around as Khorne and wrecking everyone's faces just completely out of the blue that you weren't even at war with. Nurgle can just start spreading plagues like mad. Zinch can just start like spreading. Zinch, what did Zinch do? Zinch's was something a little bit lamer. Hang on, where was the Zinch campaign mechanics? There it is. Okay, Zinch's campaign mechanics, the final version of the cult that he could do was the Campus. Destroys the cult, but increases winds of magic here and all adjacent to Tempestuous. And that's a little bit less exciting, honestly. But it is what it is. But for Khorne and Nurgle, you just start spreading your armies and your diseases throughout the Warhammer world. That's awesome. That's exactly how they should play. They did a fantastic job with Khorne and with Nurgle, who I'll get to in a little bit. Khorne, we got a tech tree again, grouped into sets of 9. That's awesome. And the little explanation down here, 8 is the number of the blood god. Khorne and the other demons cannot make diplomacy with the good factions or most of the evil factions of the Warhammer world. They can only make deals with other demons, Warriors of Chaos, Norskins, and Beastmen, and Skaven. That is neat, except for Slaanesh. Slaanesh gets to make diplomacy with the good guys and the other bad guys. But I do appreciate that as the demons. Excuse me. It does mean there will be a bit of missed opportunity, because there's always a little bit of the fun of what ifs with Total War. Like, what if Khorne made an alliance with the Empire? But of course it'd be obviously on its face stupid, and a modder can easily just make a mod where the demons can make diplomatic deals. I think that will go a lot of the way to making the demon factions play like they should. And I think that the fact that demon factions can't make diplomatic deals with most of the factions on the board will probably make up for the fact that the demons look like they're going to have some pretty strong campaign mechanics. So, to make up for it, they're almost playing a Give Me Total War campaign or whatever. What's it called? It's called like the Total War Challenge. Whatever. They're playing a Total War Challenge campaign pretty well, except for Slaanesh. So I think that's all very cool. And I am waiting on the Slaanesh blog to see some more diplomacy options, because holy shit. Is diplomacy bad in Warhammer 2? And I am excited for the possibility that they may include the diplomacy from Three Kingdoms and Troy, because it's way fucking better. The Tzeentch roster, Kairos Fateweaver. I gotta say, I was not wanting Kairos. I think Tzeentch has a lot of really cool legendary characters. And I thought Kairos was a really lame option. But I've actually been really impressed not only with the way they're adding him to the game and his model, but I've also been impressed by how much I've been enjoying his lore now I've been finding out more about it. And I actually quite like Kairos now. A large part of that was just my own lack of education on Kairos, but hey, I'm glad that Kairos is here. I'm glad they've decided to start off with clearing out all the legendary greater demons. That way, with the DLCs and free LCs, we can move on to the more interesting options. And Kairos is pretty cool, yeah. Let's see, the Exalted Lord of Change, which we don't get to really see. I don't think we've got to see the Exalted Lord of Change model yet, which is weird. But he looks cool here. And let's see, he uses the Lore of Tzeentch. Herald of Tzeentch gets access to the Lore of Tzeentch as well. It's weird seeing the Heralds as Lords, but I appreciate it as having all the Lords be... it would have been cool to have mortal Chaos Worshipper Lords at launch, but it makes sense for DLC, I guess. And we can't have every Lord of every Chaos army be Greater Demons, because that'd be OP as fuck. It's already brutal enough when you have to play against Vampire counts in the early game in Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2, because Vampire Lords are so strong. Cultists of Siege have one of the best visual designs in the whole game. They just look fantastic. The moon face and the bird face, it all looks very cool. They look like proper magical cultists. A lot of that kind of Egyptian, kind of Thoth, god of sorcery kind of deal going on here. I don't know if Thoth is actually the Egyptian god of sorcery, but he looks very cool and it looks very Egyptian adjacent, which is very good for Tzeentch. That's Tzeentch's thing. And he's also the only one who gets access to Lore of Fire. Let's see, the Iridescent Horde, who is basically the new Herald of Tzeentch, gets Metal or Tzeentch. The Herald also gets Metal, Lore of Metal. Okay, so Tzeentch has access to 3 lores. I didn't know that. I thought he only had Fire and Tzeentch. That's good. Okay, so the Tzeentch army has all the demons, which is good. There are no Chaos Warriors, though. That's the big one. That's the one that shocked everyone at the time, because there was so much talk about Zinc Warriors, at least on the Total War subreddit. And I was getting kind of sick of that talk, so there was a bit of schadenfreude at they're just not being Zinc Warriors. But that's enough of me being a petulant child. It does make for Tzeentch having one of the more interesting army setups, though, because he doesn't really get much of a front line. Tzeentch is going to be a bit more reliant on hoping that you can annihilate the enemy with sheer amounts of magic and fire before they make contact, because the only real front line they got are Blue Horrors, who are not so good at it. They're mostly just the front line because they're cheap, and Forsaken, who are capable damage dealers, but not really much of an anvil for holding the line. The Blue Horrors, the Pink Horrors, and the Exalted Pink Horrors are all, of course, hybrid infantry. And I don't know how good they'll be at it. That remains to be seen. But they are definitely very strong in ranged fight. Because there's a good couple recordings that came out of Tzeentch fighting the other armies a couple weeks ago, I think. Those recordings came out. And Tzeentch, there's a recording of Tzeentch fucking annihilating ogres in a battle. So, ooh. But it wasn't all of the horrors, though. The Flamers played into it, too. Which, Tzeentch's mortal options do seem to just be Forsaken, Chaos Knights, and Doom Knights. The Doom Knights look sick. They look like a unit that will be a ton of fun to use. They will be good old-fashioned shock flying cavalry, but the barrier makes it where they take almost no damage when they charge in, which will make them a disgusting unit to use if used properly. If you are someone who loves microwing cavalry as much as I do, these guys are going to be fucking amazing. Let's see, the Burning Chariot of Tzeentch. I don't think we've really got to see this in action yet, but hopefully it looks cool because it's got a cool ass miniature. And let's see, Furies are going to be Furies. They're pretty well just going to be Fellbats, but a little bit stronger. Screamers are going to be pretty well like Vargeist, but maybe a little bit weaker. I don't know how Screamers. I won't talk about strength. A lot of the usual demon stuff you'd expect. The Lord of Change, some people were mad that he uses the same model as... What's the Warhammer 1 Lord of Change? Whatever. The Lord of Change is the final boss of Warhammer 1. Some people were mad that they recycled that model, but it makes sense to me. I mean, they got to save money somewhere. It makes more sense to save money there. I'd rather get higher quality stuff elsewhere in the game and them save money on that, you know? You know, CA's not made of money, and this game's already very clearly high budget in a lot of places. Flamers look sick. I was really interested to see Flamers in execution, because they're a really hard one to do, I would expect. Admittedly, I'm no expert on modeling or animation, but the tabletop miniature were basically angry macaroni. And I was confused. How the hell are you going to make that not only exist in a video game and animate it properly, but make it look intimidating? They did a good job. The Flamers look great. And the Soul Grinders. Yes, the Soul Grinders. I remember when the Soul Grinder was revealed for Khorne, I was worried that everybody, all the Chaos Demons were going to get this guy and it'd be the same for everybody. Thankfully, that is not the case. The Soul Grinder of Khorne is a melee powerhouse, as he should be. The Soul Grinder of Tzeentch is an artillery piece, strangely. And the Soul Grinder of Nurgle seems to be probably a bit tankier because he's Nurgle, but also about shooting. So the Soul Grinder fulfills a different role for each army and is a little bit different for each army. So that's really cool. I'm really happy with that. And giving Tzeentch an artillery piece in the form of the Soul Grinder just makes sense, because Tzeentch is going to be one of the more defensive, shooting-heavy armies, but he never had artillery on the tabletop, so far as I'm aware. Giving him an artillery in the game will make him a much more cohesive race to play. So I'm really happy with that. And it'll give him more options in sieges, so he won't have to just run up the walls and then shoot down. Alright, let's see. Then the magic blogs. Alright, there's not too much I want to talk about here, because, hang on, let's see. It is... Yeah, they explained the difference, the changes to the Winds of Magic. Which... Oh, the Magic Lores. Oh, this is the blog I wanted to talk about. Okay. Right, so big changes to the magic system. The meter that every Lord has at their side for Winds of Magic. They've already had that in Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2, but it's just not really mattered that much. You almost never pay attention to it, at least in my case. And you don't really pay attention to whether the Winds of Magic are blowing or calming or whatever in the given province either. Which players probably should pay more attention to that, especially because that same drop-down little UI box tells you the ambush success chance, which is a very important thing to learn. And with Warhammer 3, they are making the stuff actually matter. Rather than the meter just representing whatever Winds of Magic you would have in that area, the Winds of Magic meter every army carries is a constant thing that is either built up by the regional Winds of Magic or reduced by the regional Winds of Magic. And if you're in a region where the Winds of Magic are blowing, your Winds of Magic meter goes up for that army. And if you're in a region where the Winds of Magic are calm, your Winds of Magic meter goes down. And the various army abilities that used to just flatly increase the amounts of Winds of Magic you got in battles now increase the amount of Winds of Magic you collect from being in a region where the winds are blowing. I don't know if there's ones to reduce the winds in a place where it's calming. That is all really cool. They've also changed Arcane Conduit and so on, so that I don't remember what Arcane Conduit... I think Arcane Conduit now just makes your spells stronger. It doesn't give you access to more Winds of Magic, which is important because they've also changed the way Winds of Magic work within battles, which is that, if I understand this right, cooldown time is a stat that doesn't exist anymore, and reserves are just constantly flowing down into the regular Winds of Magic amount you have, and there is no longer a cap on the amount of Winds of Magic amount you can have at a given time. And stuff that used to increase Winds of Magic reserve amount by a base amount now will just... I forget what they do. I'm really interested to see this stuff in action because I can talk about it more then. But there's a lot of stuff with Warhammer 3 that I just want to get my hands on. This is probably my most hyped up game of all time. God damn. It sounds like it could be a lot of fun, depending on how they executed it. And I think more important than anything else is the fact that they simplified the Winds of Magic UI in battles. Because learning that, like, that thing, that UI for Winds of Magic in Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2 is so obtuse and not noob-friendly at all. I am not excited for the possibility I may have to explain it to a friend sometime soon. Because it is confounding as fuck. Alright, let's see. And demons receive replenishment rate, leadership, and physical resistance debuffs whenever their Winds of Magic reserves are low. That's good. Let's see. And it also provides extra buffs when the Winds of Magic reserves are high, increasing Tzeentch's barrier recharge speed, Khorne's spell resistance, Nurgle's melee defense, and Slaaneesh's speed. That last one is going to be the curious one, because we've already seen some of the Slaanesh unit stats, and the Slaanesh unit stats are incredible for speed. Like, Keepers of Secrets have 100% movement speed, base. So if you increase that speed, Keepers of Secrets are going to run as quickly as most flying units do, while in the air. It's going to be fucking nuts. I should probably talk into the mic so you can clearly hear me. I'm talking to the... What's the name of the cameras that you use to record yourself that you connect to the computers? I'm having a brain dumb. Webcams. Yes, I'm talking to the webcam as if it can hear me. Okay, and the Storms of Magic. When you're fighting in the Chaos Realms, it's a Storm of Magic. I hope Storm of Magics also appear throughout the Warhammer world randomly as another win state. So Storms of Magic, for one thing, make infinite magic reserves and have a constant thing rolling where it will apply different kind of like map-wide spells, I think. Like, it applies map-wide passives, like if the Lore of Life is on, then it's all units gain perfect vigor. But then it randomly changes to the Lore of Light. All units gain magical attacks and immunity to psychology, right? Which must be brutal for demons. And it also offers a Cataclysm spell that you can use if you spend a certain amount of Winds of Magic, I think. And they're all crazy, of course. So I'm really surprised they implemented the Storm of Magic stuff from the tabletop. I'm happy they did, because it's a pleasant surprise. It sounds badass. And let's see. Yeah, that's the entirety of that blog. There's the Lores of Magic blog, which I, as I said earlier, won't really have much to say about. Because Lores of Magic aren't really something you can talk too much about until you actually get your hands on it. Tzeentch's magic looks like it's going to do a lot of damage. Lore of Slaanesh looks like it's... Yeah, I honestly just don't have a lot of this stuff to say about all this, because magic is really something you just have to get your hands on. I think there was one creative spell with Tzeentch. Let's see. That deserves some talking about. Let's see. Something where he could... Well, he had one spell that makes it where he can just restore the barrier of a unit, right? He can steal the Winds of Magic from an enemy caster. That is cool. I thought he had one that increased his barrier, but it doesn't look like he does. Which is good, because Warriors of Chaos should probably have access to Lore of Tzeentch as well, and a barrier boosting spell would be useless for them because they don't have barriers at all. Lore of Nurgle. I like the Herald of Nurgle, and I like that he's got the Nurgling on his shoulder. That's cool. It's cute too, but it's also cool. Lore of Yin and Lore of Yang are separate spell books. We have seen the Talons of Night spell already. It looks sick. I'm interested in the Ancestral Warriors as well. The Missile Mirror sounds bizarre. It sounds like what it is you just throw it on a missile unit, and every time they shoot themselves instead. That's kind of funny. Especially if the other player is not paying attention and continues to have that archer unit keep firing, and they just keep shooting themselves in the face. The Ancestral Warriors, I'm excited to see in action. It's a summon spell, which is a surprise. I would figure that'd just be a direct damage spell or something. And you actually summon a unit of Ancestral Warriors. That will also be interesting for modders to get their hands on. Unless the Ancestral Warriors are just like Jade Warriors, but blue. If it's like actually a unique model for Ancestral Warriors, especially if the Ancestral Warriors look like more ancient Chinese stuff, because like the Cathay units we see now are clearly based off like medieval Chinese stuff, like Ming era Chinese stuff, I believe. No, I'm not an expert. It'd be cool if the Ancestral Warriors then are like Han era Chinese warriors. That would be cool. Lore of Yang looks like a lot of your usual stuff here. I don't remember if any of these were really special. Oh, yes, the Stone Ground Stance gives a unit extra mass and expert charge defense. That's a weird spell. Okay, Lore of Ice and Lore of Frost. I don't think there was anything too huge here. The Hawks of Miska are there as a spell, which I forget. Were the Hawks of Miska an actual, like, animal in the lore? I don't remember. Like I said, I didn't have a whole lot to say about lores. Let's see. The first Legendary Lord Mechanics, which I remember people were getting a little hyped up and thinking, oh my god, Kairos is going to have like a DLC Lord-esque mechanics. No, he won't. He's just got the same usual stuff that a lot of Legendary Lords do, but it looks like he's actually got some fairly neat stuff. Like introducing the whole new reinforcement mechanic, which I was not expecting there to be an overhaul to the reinforcement mechanic, but I am fucking glad that there is, because I always thought the reinforcement mechanic was one of the worst parts of Total War campaigns. So they changed the reinforcement mechanic, if I understand things correctly, to where an army can come relatively quickly as reinforcements if they go at the position that the game automatically sets for them, or they can change at what angle they come in, but for every degree they make it different at what angle they come in case they want to like flank or come in behind their own guys. For every degree they change that, they increase the amount of time it takes for their army to spawn in. If you have Lightning Strike, that reduces that. Or maybe Lightning Strike makes it where it increases the amount of time it takes for reinforcements to arrive. I think it's the latter. I think that's a really cool way of handling all that and making it so that Lightning Strike is not a must-have perk anymore. It does mean that it's going to be harder handling multiple stacks at the same time, unfortunately, but that's what Ambush Stance is for. And Kairos' whole thing is that his mechanics are now built around that. He makes it where he can accurately predict when enemy forces will arrive on the field, and he makes it where him and his forces arrive on the field much quicker. That's all cool. He also gets his unique thing where he can equip a shard from any of the Winds of Magic, which gives him access to a couple spells as well as the passive from that Wind of Magic, that Lore of Magic. I have to say this is kind of lame. I don't think it's a, like, shit the bed, oh my god, the game's over kind of thing, but it is definitely annoying that you don't get to choose what spells you take or what spells they replace. They probably would have had to make up an entirely new UI to... They probably would have had to make up an entirely new UI to crack up a way that Kairos could take his own spells of his own choice. But, I mean, I'm glad that he gets something rather than nothing, but this is just kind of an annoying way of doing it, because there may be some spells that get replaced that you want to keep, and they probably have taken some spells that you didn't necessarily want. Like here, the Lore of Fire, you get Piercing Bolts of Burning and Flaming Sword of Ruin. Those are not the two spells you would want from the Lore of Fire. You would probably, like, Piercing Bolts of Burning, I think is a bit of an underrated spell, but even as bombardment spells go, it's not quite as good as the Lore of Metals bombardment spell. If you want any spells from Lore of Fire, you want Fireball and Burning Head. Like, what does he get from Lore of Life? He gets Regrowth and Shield of Thorns. Oh, those aren't terrible picks, actually. Let's see. In Lore of Metal, he gets Transmutation of Lead and Final Transmutation. Final Transmutation, to my understanding, is supposed to be a really good pick. I've never been able to get much use out of it. My preferred Lore of Metal spell has always been the Bombardment, that the name escapes me. And Kairos starts off... Oh, I forgot to mention the start position. He starts off in the Eastern Steppes, which I will talk about the map last. Okay. So yeah, Kairos starts off in the Eastern Steppes with a very, very, like, mediocre, if not kind of bad-looking starting army, which is presumably to make up for the fact that Kairos himself is going to be pretty strong. Alright, there we go. I had to have dinner real quick. That's probably going to be a sudden jump cut, and I don't remember exactly what I was talking about as cut that last recording, but I believe I was saying, yeah, Kairos has a not very firepower-heavy start position, or start army. But it'd probably be fun anyways. Get yourself a nice build up there. Oh, well, it occurred to me while I was having dinner, I forgot to include the Warhammer 3 map. I'll get to that in a little bit. Oh boy. Oh, no, I won't. Okay, because the next thing was what I was going to talk about. They had the, they revealed the map, partly, during the reveal of the pre-order bonus, and part of the pre-order bonus, not pre-order bonus, special edition bonus, is the Warhammer 3 campaign map on a, like, little fold-out paper, I guess. And this map was provided by, I believe his name is Cody Bonds? Yes, Cody Bonds. A YouTuber who does YouTube videos. Shocking. And he went ahead and did all this, where he cut this little part out, and then he took this part where you can't see the little map in the advertisement photo for the collector's edition, because it's being covered up by an art book or something. So he filled it in with what he assumes it's going to be. And this map is probably the biggest disappointment of the whole marketing cycle for me. I'm still very hyped up for the game, and I don't think this by any means dooms the Mortal Empires map, or Immortal Empires map, whatever they want to call it. But it's not a great map on a lot of perspectives. For one thing, the decision to orient everything by the far north, by the Chaos Portal, the far north. It's an interesting decision. I mean, I think we all knew Warhammer 3 was going to be very Chaos-focused, but it makes the rest of the map very difficult to tell what's going on. Since everything's kind of oriented in such a half-circular way, Cathay is far, far, far to the north of Kislev and Norska, when it should be at roughly the same latitude. Though that's all, and it's hard to tell what's just genuine and what's merely appearances. But that seems to be legit. That may actually not be the thing morphing it. And there's a, oh boy, the biggest part, what's not there, is the biggest part. Because Ind isn't there, Nippon isn't there, Koresh isn't there, Tor Elithus isn't there. By all means, none of that was ever guaranteed. And even if they were on the map, I don't think that most of them would ever make it in as playable. But it is disappointing to see them just not be touched at all. I know that that would be a Herculean effort of making new lore, both for Games Workshop and Creative Assembly, but the excitement was there, because Cathay opened the door, right? But, of course, there's hope for them to be present on the map in Immortal Empires. I think the idea of there being hope for them ever being implemented as playable races is entirely squashed now, sad as it is. I think more than likely the DLC races are going to just end up being Chaos Dwarfs and Dogs of War, and that's it. Not Nagash. I see a lot of people calling for Nagash. I can make a whole video talking about why it won't be Cult of Ulrich or Nagash. But we're probably just going to see Chaos Dwarfs planted down around this area here in the Darklands, and Dogs of War will probably just start positions all over the fucking map. But Nippon and Koresh, probably not coming. Not even Hobgoblin Khanates, and that seemed like a fairly lowball possibility. And that disappoints me a lot, because I was really hoping to see all that stuff fleshed out, and this seemed like the last chance for that to happen. Seems like that's not going to happen now. But it is what it is, you know? And Warhammer 3 is still going to end up probably being a great game, because, I mean, give a mouse a cookie, I guess, is almost a way of thinking about it. Like, I wouldn't have had hope for Nippon or Koresh if Cathay hadn't been confirmed at launch, right? But the fact that we've got Cathay is already more than reasonably could have been asked for. So, I'm disappointed, but not really upset. I'm still going to probably love the game, given how much I fucking adore Warhammer 2, and Warhammer 3 looks to be an extension of it, but just better in a lot of ways. But yeah, there are other problems with the map here. For instance, the Darklands, kind of small. They've been squatted down to just being tiny little sandwich Darklands, the sandwich lands. When in the lore and the tabletop, they were supposed to be a bit more long and narrow. The Mountains of Morn look like they're really only 2 or 3 provinces, maybe, which is going to be awkward for the Ogres. It means they don't have much to do. The Chaos Wastes are fucking massive, except in the east. Like, I would think there'd be more interesting stuff in the eastern Chaos Wastes, because up there's some variety. There's not just the Cathayan colonies, but there's also the Hung and the Hobgoblins and whatever, so you could have an excuse to put greenskins there, or maybe some Skaven, some Ogres. But no, the Eastern Steppes are one province. Oh, two provinces. Oh, lucky us. While the Western Chaos Wastes are all of this shit right here. And that's really just Kurgan and a couple Norscan colonies, to my understanding. Like, I know space needed to be made for the demons, but they could have put some demons in the Eastern Steppes. And why the fuck is the Empire here? If the Empire is your favorite Warhammer race, I won't knock on you that bad. Because, I mean, there's reasons to love the Empire, and I like a lot about the Empire, and I'm not going to, go on a rant, but it is just bizarre that the Empire, the core race of Warhammer 1, that Warhammer 1 was based around, pretty well the entirety of the Warhammer 1 map is the Empire. They also get to have a quarter of the Warhammer 3 map? Maybe Kriv simply did that just because they wanted there to be territory for Kislev to take. But, Kislev in the lore has already expanded into the Darklands before. I don't... That's the befuddling part. It makes sense to have one DLC Empire Legendary Lord, but there's not going to be so many that it's well, we need the entire Empire to be in game. Is there? This map is befuddling in a lot of ways. I'm really not sure what the idea was. Even the Chaos Realm. The Chaos Realm takes up... I can't necessarily eyeball it, but it looks like around a quarter of the map, but it's only 4 provinces. One for each of the gods. I have to assume Krev Assembly made it where this map there will be a just shit ton of settlements in a single province. Because otherwise, this actually has less provinces than the Vortex map does in Warhammer 2. And Krev Assembly have already said this map is twice the Vortex map size. And a lot of the Vortex map is water. Either there are a massively increased amount of settlements within a single province, or Krev Assembly, for whatever reason, decided, let's have a map where there's a zillion miles between every settlement. Which probably would not be fun to play, honestly. That much travel time just kind of gets annoying in a Total War game. We haven't got to see the campaign map in gameplay. That will be a big part of it. And I don't think you can really judge it until then. And even then, there are a lot of judgments that can't be made until you get your hands on it. But the campaign map so far seems like it is definitively the worst part of Total War Warhammer 3. And the distinct hope of the Immortal Empires map is that everything that went wrong with this map will not stay for that. The Chaos Wastes in the West will not be as emphasized in Immortal Empires. The Chaos Wastes in the East will get a little more emphasis. The Mountains of Moor will get a little bit more emphasis. Cathay might just get a little bit more coastline and shit. I can't hope for Nippon or Ind or Koresh at this point, because it seems like that's something they're just going to want to stay away from, because it would take so much to develop just even the settlements there, the province names there. But we'll have to see with Immortal Empires. Immortal Empires has become even more confusing than it already was. Okay, to get the saddest part of the game out of the way, Ogres! This is the really exciting part here, because Ogres always had a unique visual on the tabletop, and it was always a big question, what are they going to look like in game, how are they going to play, because they're so strange. And with the campaign mechanics, they sound like they're not too unusual, but still sound like fun. The unique thing for the Ogres, very definitely, is that they get the ability to more or less just plant down a settlement wherever the fuck they want. They can plant down a camp built from one of their armies, and camps are like settlements. They can build up a lot of the things. I don't think they can build money on their own, but they do raid on their own. And they provide a variety of buildings that buff nearby friendly armies, as well as allowing them to recruit. And I don't know what else they might do. They require population surplus, and like Tomb King armies, they have a cap that you increase through the research tree, I think. And that is a really cool feature. I really like that. It's accurate to the lore from what we know. Represents how ogres are not entirely a horde race that is always on the move like beastmen are. They do make places to live, but at the same time, they aren't great builders of cities. So the Ogres can still occupy, but only to the degree the Norskins can. But where the Norskins can kind of have a bit of trouble occupying land because they only have minor settlements, which ideally will change in Warhammer 3, because minor settlements will be a lot more defensible in Warhammer 3, ideally. Ogres will be able to hold land better because of the camps. I think that's a really smart change, and it's a neat bit. In the lore, I believe there was a time where the Ogres set up a camp in Stirland and started fucking up the Empire pretty bad. So I think it's a nice representation of that as well. The contract system, which I am not so big on. The contract system, in essence, sounds really cool, because it encourages you to play as the Ogres do, just taking random contracts from random dudes all over the map and waging war in their name. I was kind of more so expecting them to do the Three Kingdoms mercenary mechanic, which I believe was closer to make a mercenary contract with a faction, and they'll pay you extra for every settlement of their enemies that you raise or sack or whatever, and every army that you beat. This is different. You just get a contract. It's pretty well just a mission, a quest. The mission system in Warhammer is not so great, especially with the way we randomly generate stuff. You'll get stuff like, hey, go declare war on your best buddy to get +1 recruitment rank for missile units for 8 turns, which is not great. Excuse me. I hope this is better. It does not look great at the outset, because a lot of it is go take out this army for a pittance of money and some diplomatic relations. Diplomatic relations may be more important in Warhammer 3 if Warhammer 3 implements the Three Kingdoms diplomacy, because diplomacy in Three Kingdoms can win or lose you the game. But if diplomacy does not change that much, diplomatic relations are not going to be worth that much. You can achieve the same effect just by spending some money. Getting 3,000 gold for taking out a settlement might be kind of nice, but I think that these rewards need to be buffed up. I think right now these aren't really good enough motivation to encourage the player to go and do something they wouldn't ordinarily do. And if they're just there as a system to give the player enhanced rewards for something they're already going to do, it's a weird way to do it, and frankly, that they didn't really need to do that. Meat, of course, the Ogres build up meat. It seems to be on a per army basis. Every Ogre unit consumes a single meat per turn, including Gnoblars, which I don't think is a smart choice. I think Creative Assembly should make it where Gnoblars don't consume meat. I think that having each individual Ogre unit consume meat is a neat way to try and counter the fact that you're going to be running around as an all-monster army, which can be kind of strong, especially in the early game. So making it where Gnoblars don't consume meat would be a nice way of balancing Ogres out, at least in the early game. And you can spend from your meat pool to perform various rituals that buff your army. Increase melee attack, increase winds of magic, increase campaign movement range, and reduce global recruitment duration. That all sounds cool. The Fill Your Bellies one to reduce global recruitment duration specifically sounds really good for encouraging the player to do more kind of globe-trotting play styles, so they can keep an army going even when it's abroad. The big name system sounds like a lot of fun. Sounds like it encourages you to make your Ogre Lords and Heroes a little more characterful, and not just, whatever, here's a lord, I need to go lead an army, fuck it. And I like it. And it sounded like some of them are pretty crazy. Oh, no, that's it. Okay. I had heard that one of them... I remember when this blog came out, I remember someone saying something about Wallbreaker, and I assumed that meant there was a big name that causes Wallbreaker. But no, it's just that they have Wallbreaker. Okay, so the Ogre characters have Wallbreaker, which is insane. All Ogres have Wallbreaker, which is insane. And honestly, I think they should change it so that not every Ogre unit gets Wallbreaker. It should be a bit more special than that. But then I think Creative Assembly should be handing out Wallbreaker evenly to all factions, and not just to the Ogres and that one Skaven unit. I think Creative Assembly disagrees with me on that, though. The big name system sounds like a lot of fun as a way to give Ogre units unique equipment that other races would not get access to. In the same way that for the Dwarfs, it's been really cool since the Dwarfs got their overhaul at the end of Warhammer 2, that they can equip the unique runes. I think that it's a fun, simple way to encourage players to use the equipment system more and customize their Lords and Heroes more. And it's a nice send up to the tabletop, because on the tabletop, the Dwarfs did get unique equipment through the runes, and the Ogres did get unique equipment through the big names. I believe Bretonnian characters could also get unique equipment through vows and... No, virtues. They could take unique virtues. I'd like to see that added. That'd be cool. The Ogre technology pool is nice and balanced, and a lot of it is about boosting your camps. That's nice. There we go. And the next one up was the Ogre battle improvements. Yes, there we go. Okay, the battle improvements. Right, so they added, this is a lot of stuff that's actually very nice if memory serves. The flying toggle, that is cool. It's going to be especially nice for when I like to just take screenshots and it bugs the shit out of me that I'll have an important unit like a dragon missing and I want him to sit there and take the screenshot. The formation support, right, the drag out your armies. Yes, that is cool. The really cool thing is that the formation you have for your army gets saved after you set it, and the next battle, it will start with that formation. So for the armies where you are trying not to be too creative and mix it up between battles and just sticking with one formation, it will just put that out right there immediately. That is a great quality of life feature and a tremendous time saver. Let's see. Hotkeys for all kinds of stuff. Guard, mode, skirmish, and fire at will now have hotkeys. I don't know why they didn't have hotkeys before. The idle hotkey has been added. That's sweet. Healing is now applied as a percentage of max health per second rather than a flat value. That is a curious one, because that means healing is going to be way more meaningful for elite units. It already kind of was. I don't know exactly. I need to start going around and comparing the health amounts for units in Warhammer 2, because I do think infantry generally has more health than cavalry. But for monsters, I think it differs a bit more. We'll have to see. Healing can be stunted by fire damage, gives you more of a motivation to use fire damage. It will pose the interesting question of, there's a lot of units that are specifically now supposed to be countered by fire damage because regeneration has been made a lot stronger. And not all races get access to fire damage. If memory serves, like, off the top of my head, like half of them don't have access to fire damage. So that's going to be a unique problem that we're going to have to face now. Oh, excuse me. Abilities that boost fatigue now occur over time rather than just instantly healing their fatigue. Let's see. Charge Reflect has been added. That's a big change brought over from 3 Kingdoms. Which, let's see, it's Charge Reflection for long weapon units. I thought it would just be for certain units like halberds, but no, it's for spearmen as well. Which, and that is a big change because that nerfs cavalry a lot. A lot of people are going to be fucking mad about that. Honestly, I've been fine with how cavalry is in Warhammer since day one. I don't think that you should get rewarded for face charging spearmen with your knights. But there are a lot of people who disagree and loved how in Medieval 2, knights were just the end-all be-all threats to every fucking thing on the planet. Different strokes, I guess, but Medieval 2 is always there. Units that are braced now have a brace status icon. That's really nice, because I would always get confused about whether a unit was braced or not. And let's see, spells added an option to automatically take the game into slow motion. That is a big one. That is a very nice quality of life feature as well, because there are some times where aiming a spell can be a pain in the ass. Especially as there's all kinds of shit going on around you. Magic resistance has been reworked into spell resistance, which is a tremendous... It's kind of a nerf to the dwarfs and a buff to everyone who has magic attacks. Because magic attacks are no longer a thing that can hurt you as much as they help you. And let's see, the new Thorns effect, which makes it where you take damage if you attack a certain unit. That's cool. I'm sure there'll be good uses for that. And healing spells can now heal chariots and artillery. I didn't even know they couldn't, but I guess I just never used healing spells on artillery or chariots that much before. Health bars now will show the damage. When they receive big amounts of damage, you'll notice it'll have like a little gray life section like Street Fighter. Though unlike Street Fighter, I don't think you'll be able to really recover it. But it will show you whenever a unit takes a huge impact, you'll be able to see that it was like, holy shit, that was 25% of that unit's health. And tick marks denoting the 75%, 50%, and 25% health thresholds, which is very useful for some spells and some abilities. Off the top of my head, what was it? There's some units... Well, that's very important for High Elves, actually, because their units get a lot worse once they drop below the 50% health mark. The mass stat has been added to the unit cards. That is a big change. That is a very nice one because there are some unit types that really depend on their mass to be strong, like Chariots and some of the bigger, more charge-heavy monsters. It's nice to know that. The 3-tier system from Rome 2 and Attila has been added, which is much better for new players, so they understand how strong or weak a unit is supposed to be. Sub-factions have this one. Yes, this one. I like this one. Sub-factions have been removed from custom battles, quick battles, and are replaced by having you pick your race and then select your color profile. I like that a lot. I don't know how far they're going to go with it. Ideally, they go pretty far with it and allow you to access pretty well all the color profiles, because there are some factions in the game that do not have a legendary lord attached, and so you can't use them in custom battles or multiplayer battles. And that's a pity, because there's some pretty fucking sick paint schemes. I don't think there is a... Can you pick Averland in custom battles? I don't think you can. But, like, I always like the Averland scheme for the Empire. Or Ostland. Ostland would be cool. And it goes on for all the various races. You can now search and filter through maps and tag favorite maps. That's another big change. Because some of the maps in Total War Warhammer has a lot of maps. And a lot of them are basically the same. Just kind of, here are some hills and trees without much interesting variation to it. But then there are some Warhammer maps that either are a lot more fun in gameplay or visually are incredible. And I'm just going to want to favorite those and ignore most of the maps that are just like, it's the hills of Lyonesse. Who cares? Ooh. Let's see. You can now set your army presets on race and battle types. That's cool. Unit Browser added as a sister page to the Spell Browser, allows you to peruse the full rosters at any point. I want to see this in action, because that could be pretty fucking awesome. It's annoying. Like, hopefully, for one thing, that gets rid of the unit dictionary that we have now that requires an internet connection. That's really dumb. And hopefully, it makes it where you can browse all units just by pulling it down, even if you're in a battle. Because you might be curious about some units sometimes when you're playing the game, you know? And a general overhaul for UI for various menus. It does look like we're going back to the Warhammer 1 structure of you pick your campaign, then you pick the race you're playing, then you pick the Legendary Lord. I think that is fine, because Warhammer 2 started to have way too much shit. Especially if you have mods in Warhammer 2, like, it's insane. It takes forever to find Chaos or Beastmen or Norska at the very end. So those are all some very high quality of life improvements. There we go. The Ogre Kingdom's roster is pretty well the tabletop roster with a couple additions and minus Thunder Tusks and Yetis, which is good. Which is very good. I'm happy to see pretty well all of it faithfully added, and we know Thunder Tusks and Yetis are coming down the line, because Thunder Tusks are probably the most iconic Ogre unit, and Yetis are too strange to live, too unique to die. There we go. Grease's Goldtooth on his cart. A lot of people were mad he isn't getting carried by Noblars. I don't really mind as long as the cart is appropriately pimped out, which I think it could do with more pimping, honestly, but I think that's up to the modders. Let's see. Scrag the Slaughterer looks fantastic. The hair on his head is getting smaller. Scrag's starting to suffer from a little bit of balding. But this art of Scrag is fantastic. Damn. Oh yeah, that looks great. Okay, and he's got the Lore of Maw here. Nothing unusual. Tyrants. I like this Tyrant look. I hope there are more looks to the Tyrants than this, but I like this Tyrant look. The Slaughtermaster, the Hunter. Nothing unsurprising here. The Butcher, the Firebelly. The Firebelly is a shock. The Bruiser is missing. He is the hero they skipped out on. But I'm glad to sacrifice the Bruiser for the Firebelly. The Firebelly is way cooler, way more distinctive, way more unique, both in gameplay and in visuals and in lore. And the Firebelly is interesting from a lore perspective, I think, because he represents that the Ogres have two gods. The Great Maw and the Firemouth. And he's a really cool representation of that. And the Firebelly is also just really cool because a lot of the Ogres stick by this kind of like ramshackle parody of Mongols or other steppe peoples. But the Firebelly almost looks like he was ripped straight from Polynesia, which is an entirely different aesthetic from everything else in Warhammer. Obviously, I'd love to see a Warhammer take on Polynesia altogether, but I mean, given that that's an impossibility unless a modder gets to work on it, the Fire Bellies are a pretty fucking great implementation of that aesthetic for just one unit within a culture that he otherwise kind of looks a bit different from. But I am very happy to see the Fire Bellies, and that is a proper Fire Belly. Here we go. Gnoblars! Yes! The Gnoblars and the Gnoblar Trappers! I am... Ooh, do the Gnoblar Trappers actually have the little wolf skins? I didn't see that in the gameplay footage. I hope they do, because that's so cute and endearing. The Gnoblars do look a bit too much like regular goblins, but money has to be saved in some places. And I don't mind Gnoblars being a bit too similar to goblins, because it gets to save Criv Assembly money on animations. Which means Criv Assembly can put that money elsewhere, where I appreciate the money a bit more. The Gnoblar Trappers, we've seen some gameplay stuff, like we've seen the stat list for these guys. Gnoblar Trappers sound really strong. They're like regular Gnoblars, but they get a missile attack, and they cause damage and slowness, I think, in an area AoE around themselves, constantly. That sounds really strong, at least to me. A hybrid unit that can be missile support and AoE damage support and chaff all at the same time sounds like a really valuable unit to take, even if you are at a point in the game where you don't want to take Gnoblars anymore. It still sounds like you want to take a couple Gnoblar Trappers, just as at least support units. The Ogre Bulls, who we've already got to see in the game now, they're called Ogre Mercenaries in Warhammer 2, but they come in a decent more variety of ways. Dual weapons and the Iron Fists. Iron Guts look sick. We already got to see them up here. Let me see. There we go. Let's just zip on up to the top. We get to see them in the Greasus screenshot up here. You can see one right there. They look very good. Let's see. And the Man-Eaters, who we've also already got to see through the Ogre Mercenaries mechanic in Warhammer 2, but there's a lot more varieties of them. I say a lot. There's actually 2 more varieties of them. Single Weapon, which is not too exciting, and Iron Fist, which is not too exciting. Okay, I hyped that up a lot more than it deserved. Saber Tusks, the art looks sick of them. Gorgers, who do not look like this in-game. The Gorgers, it's always kind of a weird thing. The Gorgers, going from 6th edition to 8th edition on the tabletop, in 6th edition, Ogres had this, like, weird pale gray skin. And so did the Gorgers. And then moving forward from 6th edition to 8th edition, Ogres were changed to have, like, kind of white or Asian, like European or Asian skin tones. While the Gorgers stayed with the same kind of, like, supernaturally pale look. So, I was kind of expecting that to keep for the game, but the Gorgers we've seen in the trailer so far actually seem to be the complete opposite and be very dark-skinned, which is a very strange change. I was not expecting that at all. The Giant does not look like the Giant that the Ogres had on the tabletop, the Slave Giant, but it is still nonetheless a big send-up to a very popular fan-made miniature, I believe, and it still looks different enough. I like it. The Giant's probably going to be more of a different presence for the Ogres than he is on the other rosters. It's going to be interesting to see. I do think the Giant is generally an underrated unit, but nowadays, sometimes a YouTuber will talk about something and his opinion becomes the public opinion. The Stonehorns, there's 3 variations of Stonehorn in the game now, I think. We'll see. But the Stonehorn sounds really cool. It sounds like it should be kind of a cycle charging based monster, which I like a lot better than just having a regular ass beatstick monster, personally. I want to say that in terms of other cycle charging monsters, there's only really the Cambrian War Sphinx? The Vargeist probably is a cycle charging monster as well. But I'm glad to see that for the Ogres. Lead Belchers, of course. Dudes with cannons. Here we go. The other variant of the Stonehorn is with the Harpoon Launcher. Yes, that... Wait, I thought you could take a Feral Stonehorn, a regular Stonehorn with a Hunter, and a Stonehorn with a Hunter that has a Harpoon Launcher. Either which way, the Harpoon Launcher, let's see. Is it anti-large? I don't remember. If the Harpoon Launcher is anti-large, combine that with probably the anti-infantry power of the Stonehorn, and we may have another Scourge Runner Chariot situation on our hands. Another unit that is kind of just good for all situations. The Mournfangs look great. We've already got to see them. Though they do have extra variations here. They're great weapons variation. I am not surprised, though I was kind of curious to see if they would implement the Ogre Mournfang Cavalry with pistols. Because that shit would be scary. But I can see why Crib simply decided that Skirmish Cavalry seemed kind of out of place in the Ogre army list. And Rynox Cavalry. This was the big shocker. I was expecting these guys to be missing and Thunder Tusks to be in the game because Rynox Cavalry were never part of the core Ogre Kingdom's army list. I believe they were only ever implemented in White Dwarf, and that was before Mournfangs existed. But here they are, and they are supposed to be the super heavy cavalry, even heavier than the Mournfangs, that's saying a lot. And they seem to be the new kind of in-game elite unit for the Ogres, which is going to be interesting. They may even be kind of a competition for the Blood Knights and the Grail Knights and the Demogryph Knights. It'll be interesting to see. Give me a second to take a drink. There we go. And at the very end, the Scrap Launcher and the Iron Blaster. So yeah, it's pretty well every Ogre unit is here. Which is going to make them very interesting in gameplay, because if memory serves, what I've heard is that on the tabletop, the Ogre roster was actually one of the more Jack of Trades style factions. Which I imagine things will be a bit different. Things are going to be considerably different in Warhammer, the Total War Warhammer, because of the anti-large system and the anti-infantry system. So suddenly with the Ogres, whenever you're going against the Ogres, you need to take all anti-large, much in the same way that when you're going against Dwarfs, you have to take all anti-infantry. And I don't believe that system was really existent on the tabletop. So that's going to be one big change. But other than that, it does kind of look like the Ogres are going to be, like on tabletop, more of a Jack of Trades race. Especially since we've got to see Ogre Mercenaries in gameplay. And while they do have decent charge bonuses, they're for the most part not the, like, incredible knock your ass clear out of your seat charge bonus monsters that everybody was expecting them to be. They aren't quite competitive with Minotaurs, for instance. At least none of the units we get access to. And it looks like that trend will continue, where the Ogres will actually be kind of a race that can do a little bit of everything, like the Empire, the High Elves, or the Greenskins. And so they can play offense, they can play defense, they can take a melee focus, they can take a ranged focus, and so on. They can be fast, they can be slow, wherever you need. So look pretty cool. And let's see, there should only just be 2 more blogs, 3. Greasus and Scragg's campaign mechanics, it's not going to be too exciting. Greasus gets more diplomacy. That face. I forgot about Greasus' face here. Okay, diplomatic relations, plus 20 with Ogre Kingdoms, income from trade, unit mass. So, it does look like Greasus is going to properly play as he should, which is a more peaceful Ogre who's more about making money the peaceful way, which I like. That should be the way that Greasus plays, because that's how Greasus is in the lore. Greasus is changing things for the Ogre Kingdoms because he's so diplomatic. And the unit mass plus 25%, goddamn, I can't stop giggling at Greasus' face. The unit mass stat for Greasus is a very strange new change, as I don't think there's ever been anything in the game that's quite increased mass like that. So it's very strange for him to do that. It is cool, though, because it means that Greasus is going to play the game differently from Scrag, because Greasus is going to have more of a kind of shock and awe style of gameplay he focuses on, as his units will be much more impactful on the charge, regardless of charge bonus. It'll be interesting to see. While, let's see, oh yeah, the skill tree, I forgot they were showing that. And Greasus gets a start position, which he also gets a kind of a lame army. I guess because, again, Greasus himself is so strong, so you just get Noblars, Saber Tusks, and not even Ogre Bulls with Iron Guts or Iron Fists or dual weapons, but just regular, plain-ass Ogre Bulls. I have to assume Greasus is a fucking melee beast for them to nerf him this much by just sticking him with this weak of an army. Or maybe in Warhammer 3 all the starting armies are weak. We haven't got to see all of them yet. Let's see. Scrag gets increased campaign movement range and increased hero capacity and recruit rank for butchers. So not an exciting one, I'll say. Definitely one where he'll be throwing around a lot more butchers, and one where he's encouraged to run all over the world a lot faster. but not a huge, like, Greas's campaigns mechanics set him apart a little bit more. Scragg's don't seem to. But that's kind of how it goes sometimes. Let's see. And Scrag gets... What is this? Oh, he gets unique big names. Okay. Wait, hang on. I don't remember seeing this. Okay, so yeah, okay, he just gets access to some unique powers. Okay. And his big names, which provide more meat, more diplomatic relation. Okay, so the legendary lords have unique big names. That's cool. Okay, and for Scrag with Slaughterer start position, he gets a bit of a better choice. He gets more or less the same army, but he gets Gorgers instead of Saber Tusks, which I'm going to assume is a fairly big improvement. Let's see. And here's the most recent bits of Warhammer 3 news, which are the Nurgle campaign blog and Nurgle's units. And oh boy, it seems like they're saving some of the nuttiest for last, which makes me very excited to see Slaanesh. I'll definitely be putting up a video when Slaanesh comes up. So Nurgle gets his whole unique thing surrounding buildings, where his buildings, once they are built, will naturally upgrade themselves up the tiers over time, only to die at the end of their tree and be reborn in their initial form. And every time it moves up a tier, it provides a set of units that can then be recruited from, I believe, just about anywhere instantly, but they start off at almost no health. So Nurgle, rather than building up armies directly by just hiring out units and recruiting them, Nurgle has to wait for his units to grow and then harvest from his garden. That is sick. That is a awesome way of making Nurgle unique. Nurgle is like corn for me, where like the campaign mechanics alone are really enticing me to play him. Like it's probably between him and Khorne as to who will be my second campaign that I play, unless Slaanesh turns out to have even nuttier campaign mechanics. This is all a really cool way of doing this, and it makes me interested because some of these buildings, like, I think what it is like the more you upgrade your main settlement, the higher tier your buildings can get. But that'll be really interesting to see, because I wonder what the benefits will be like at the higher tiers, and how much you may have to worry as Nurgle. Well, are they going to hit when are my enemies going to attack me when my buildings are in their lower stages of growth? And it makes me wonder if there's, like, you want to specifically time when you build certain buildings to make sure that, like, they all are on different cycles, so you're never too weak at one given time, or maybe timing them all, build them all at the same time so that they're all perfectly in sync, and you're just incredibly strong at some times and weak at other times. Nurgle seems like he's going to play the game entirely different from everybody else, and that is good. That will make him so much more interesting. That is just such a sick way of doing things. And the Plague Cauldron. This is what I think, well, I wanted, and I think everybody else wanted for Nurgle as soon as they saw the kind of dinner plate, whatever mechanic that Grom, the Paunch, gets. Where Nurgle can combine, let's see, base plagues, symptoms, and, okay, I don't remember exactly how this works, but yeah, he starts off with a base plague, throws on symptoms for spending extra bits of infections, and he builds a plague that he can either infect an army or settlement of his own with, or he can summon a plague cultist to spread it elsewhere, which I assume will be like the Tomb King Necrotex that can build a ruin into instantly a tier 3 settlement, or the Skaven heroes that are built exclusively just to build undercities, right? Something like that. That's perfect for Nurgle. Spreading his plagues everywhere, and they all have weird effects they can do. Like, let's see, the Pox decreases cycle time for friendly buildings, increases growth for friendly settlements. So a Pox is something you want to put on your own settlements. Buboes reduce casualty replenishment rate and increases attrition while under siege within enemy settlements. Excuse me. So you want to drop that against the enemy when they're on the defense, and you want to take their cities easier. Auge applies attrition to enemy armies and reduces their campaign movement range. You want to throw that on enemies that are on the offensive and in your territory. Rot instead of giving infections whenever it is spread, adds a unit of Nurglings to your recruitment pool. That might be good in the early game, but not so great in the late game. And Palsy reduces melee attack of enemy armies. So they all have different purposes that you might want to throw different symptoms on. It all sounds fucking sick. And every time they infect somebody, you get an infection. And you can spend the infections to get even better plagues, to get more infections. Nurgle just sounds awesome. There we go. And let's see, the Unholy Manifestations and Cults. I don't remember there being anything particularly special here. You do get massively increased replenishment rate while disabling campaign movement. That sounds fitting for Nurgle, I suppose. Increases the chance of plague spreading. Increases growth in the local province and decreases recruitment costs by 20%. That sounds pretty fucking good, though perhaps they'd be a little bit stronger in the early game than the late game. But it makes sense. You want to put it more in the late game so the player can't just have Nurgle get a meteoric start. And after 3 turns, gives a random plague to every army and settlement in the same province as the target army. That sounds nuts. While his cults build up infections. Yeah, that's, Oh, increases infections if growth in the region is 200 or more. I do remember reading that. Yes, that is... Nurgle just sounds awesome. Okay, and the tech tree is grouped in groups of 7, like the other Chaos Gods. It is... They've just done a fantastic job with so much of this. I know that there's so much of this has just been me going through, and like, especially for the Nurgle one, it occurs to me now I didn't pay that much attention when I was reading the blog at first, and I'm just getting wowed all over again. But this is all fantastic stuff. And the Nurgle roster is also fantastic. Nurgle's roster is probably the best looking of all the demon rosters in that it looks like it's fully properly implemented, and it doesn't seem like he's really missing anything. I mean, everybody wants to see the mortal Chaos Warriors for the various gods. But for a Nurgle demonic roster with just a few mortal supplements, Nurgle seems like he's got like the most complete roster. At least partly because he seems to have the least mortal units. And the T-posing Nurglings carrying the Palanquin, of course. Kugoth looks great. I figured Kugoth would not get his Palanquin. He got his Palanquin. That is shocking and amazing, and I love it. The Nurglings look like proper Nurglings. They are a proper swarm. There's the Herald Nurgle and the Great Unclean One, unsurprisingly. And the depressed cultist of Nurgle, there we go, plague ridden, whatever. Nurglings. I did not think they were going to be able to do Nurglings properly. I thought Nurglings were just going to be like goblins. Or Skaven slaves, right? 1 Nurgling per unit, they're just chaff. But no, they're an actual swarm. And so far, the only swarm unit in the game. And that is a complete surprise, but I'm glad Crib Assembly finally figured it out. How to do it properly. I imagine they were hell to animate, but it's a hell that's worth it, because for Nurgle, they are the signature unit. You can't really go without them. Plague Bearers look good. I don't remember if they look like quite like this in the gameplay, because all the trailers we've seen of Nurgle so far have been emphasizing the Nurglings rather than the Plague Bearers. But the Plague Bearers are never what people are there for with Nurgle, are they? Forsaken again, yada yada. And Exalted Plague Bearers, who are hybrid infantry, which is a shock. They throw grenades pretty well, death's heads, explosive ranged weapons with armor piercing, but limited ammunition. So Nurgle, they've done very... Crib Assembly, inevitably, when they were doing demons, had to recognize that 3 out of the 4 armies would be, logically, if they stuck completely to the tabletop, almost all melee, right? Khorne gets no ranged units except for the Skull Cannon. Slaanesh, I don't know if Slaanesh gets any ranged units, at least out of the demons. And Nurgle's only ranged unit in the demon roster was the Rotflies, or Poxdrones, what do they call it when they're ridden? Anyways. And so Crib Assembly made the decision to throw in more missile units, both for Tzeentch and Nurgle, and possibly Slaanesh as well. We've not got to see them yet. And the Exalted Plague Bearers of Nurgle seem like a fun way of doing that. They're still sticking to the theme of Nurgle not being a ranged heavy faction, because he shouldn't be, but still giving you some variety, right? So it's not just all melee beat sticks. Furies are here. Beasts of Nurgle look great. I'm really excited to see these guys in action, or girls. I don't know which one they're supposed to be. They're kind of going for... I won't say. The Beasts of Nurgle, though, seem like they could be really fun just in terms of animations if we get to see them properly. I am very curious if they actually go to the trouble of making the Beast of Nurgle be animated in such a way that it looks like it actually is, you know, looking like an excited puppy and going up to cuddle with the enemies. Because that's the most fun part of the Beast of Nurgle's lore, of course. And if it's just going around suplexing people and punching the shit out of them and eating them, then it kind of loses the Beast of Nurgle's charm, if you ask me. The Plague Toads, complete shocker. I thought for certain these guys were going to be saved for a Tamacon DLC. But it does make sense if Crevice simply wants to double down on the idea of starting off with the demons and adding mortals later. Especially for Nurgle, they seem to have gone with this, because with Ancient Corn they get a lot more mortals, but with Nurgle it seems like the only mortals he gets are Forsaken and Chaos Spawn, unless I'm forgetting some. Rot Flies and Plague Toads alike, so Nurgle gets access to some speedy stuff, which is important, because the question I had about Nurgle is Nurgle going to have any answers to Skirmish Cav other than Furies, and the answer is going to be yes. Let's see. And the Rot Flies and the Pox Riders and the Spawn. Okay, Spawn and Nurgle look like they have a cool, unique model. That's a surprise. But the Pox Riders are the Plague Toad Riders. Yes. So a lot of demons being ridden by other demons here. And the Plague Drones, which can come with either the regular melee variant or the Death's Head's ranged variant. And the Great Unclean One, which surprisingly, like the... I didn't get to talk about this, but like the Lord of Change, the Great Unclean One gets the ability to use bound spells, become an outright spell caster once you get later enough into the tech tree to unlock spells for them, which is interesting. I mean, it's loreful, by all means, but it's a surprise, because we've had units with bound spells before, but never non-Lord or Hero units that were outright spellcasters themselves. That could be kind of interesting, though, especially because in light of the existence of, like, miscasting as a mechanic, right? You might want to have your regular Lords of Change and your regular Great Unclean Ones cast before your Lords and Heroes, so that if they miscast and get hurt, it doesn't really matter that much. And the Soul Grinder of Nurgle, which is a missile platform. And it does so at artillery ranges, though I don't know if it can knock down walls with it. I kind of doubt it. It all looks very good, though. Like, Creative Assembly has just done a great job with Warhammer 3, it looks like. Obviously, if we could all get our hands on it, it could be shit. That'd be unusual. That would be entirely without warning. But it looks like Warhammer 3 is going to be pretty fucking fantastic in a lot of ways. And I'm very happy with the way it's gone so far. The campaign map is the only thing I can think of that I'm really unhappy with. And I'm very excited to see what comes out in the next couple months. Yeah, 3 months of hype that are left out. And I am very interested to see what comes afterwards. If you were hoping that I'd come on here screaming about how I think Warhammer 3 is going to be shit, then I'm afraid... sorry that you'd be disappointed, I guess. But either which way, I guess you'd have to be some kind of masochist to have even stuck through the entire video. Either which way, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.